Oh, hey, we're on.
Oh, yeah, okay, yes, hi.
Hey, welcome to the Dream 10X podcast. It's your boy JC.
And Dr. Capel.
And this is episode 79, and today we are going to talk about...
Excelsior! The Amazing Life of Stanley.
Wait, why is it called Excelsior?
Because that is his call sign. Excelsior!
Call sign for what?
That's how he communicates with his fans, true believers.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Have you heard Excelsior before? Have you
No.
heard that? Oh, okay.
No.
Yeah, Excelsior!
Okay.
It's a thing. Only for true believers.
So we're reading 52 books in 52 weeks, and this week is Dr. Capel's turn to review the book about one of the books that we've read about Stanley.
Yes.
This is one of the better books about Stanley.
Well, because he wrote it. It's not a biography.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, he had some help with George Mayer, who did the editing around it and added some commentary throughout, which is helpful for context and things. But Stan is hilarious. He's such a funny writer. And so it was really a joy to read this book, especially because, I'm a huge fan, and so hearing it in his words was just so cool. So I could hear him telling the story when when I was reading it, so that was just amazing. I'm a little geeked out fangirl. So Stanley, guess what his real name was?
Stanley.
His birth name was Stanley.
I wanted to know that.
Stanley Lieber, and he changed...
Stanley.
Yeah.
Stanley.
Yes. And Stanley Lieber, and so he changed it to Stan Lee. Funny, because he thought that Stanley Lieber would always, when he wrote a real serious novel, that's the name he would want to use.
Stanley
Lieber, his birth name is what he would want to use for his real novelist. So he changed his comic book name as an author to Stan Lee, a pseudonym, so that he could save his real name for a comic book. But eventually he and his wife both changed their names to Lee because everybody knew him as such. And when he tried to publish a book by Stan Lieber, everybody was like, "Who's that? We don't watch it." So hilarious.
Interesting.
Yeah, so he was born in 1922, and so sadly he passed away in 2018. And he was the writer, editor, and publisher, and the forever chairman of the Marvel Comics. And during the 1960s, he created the Marvel Universe. So we have 5 key takeaways. I'll summarize, I'll say each one, and then we'll go back and talk about each one. So first, you never know where life is going to take you. Second, recognize your strengths and empower your team. 3, engage with your fans. Engage with those around you. 4, use your experiences to create meaning in your work. And 5, influence on a generation. Well, okay.
Well, wait, what, 5 again? Say it slower?
I wasn't done yet.
Oh, sorry. Couldn't understand what you said.
That's because I hadn't finished it. Influence on a generation, i.e., especially...
Influence on a generation.
I.e., me.
Okay.
Yes.
I didn't hear that part.
Oh, okay. So I said it too fast.
Jeez, go ahead.
All right, so number 1, you never know where life is going to take you. So he grew up in New York City and in a poor family, and he lived in a building, and his only window was facing another building. So he couldn't really see outside. He couldn't see kids playing. And he always wanted to have that view and thought that he'd made it. So when he actually got to California and got his big house and had a place in the ocean, he's like, I finally made it. This is amazing. I could see outside.
I escaped from New York.
Yeah, well, and just being able to see outside, and that's something James and I talk about when we want to build a house. Like, I need windows, I need light, I need to see what's going on around me. So it was kind of interesting. But with that was really helpful in this upbringing because he was surrounded by books. He loved reading. And so not being able to see outside really made him dive into his books and be alone with his imagination and these amazing stories. He loved Shakespeare.
Interesting.
Yeah, I thought so too. And he also loved the Bible. And he liked it because of the prose and the word and the way that they talk, the these, thous, those.
He grew up Jewish, right?
He was. Mm-hmm. Yep. He's Jewish. And so this reading Shakespeare and the Bible and that love of that poetry and prose is actually what influenced how he wrote Thor, which I thought was kind of cool.
Wow.
So you never know how your previous experiences are going to influence cool things that you do in the future. So Lee started working at Timely Comics in 1939. He was 17 years old.
What was it?
Timely.
Timely.
Timley. He was 17 years old. And he was an assistant there, and then he finally wrote his first filler script story in Captain America #3. in 1941. So he was.
So he didn't create Captain America.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. And then he was 19 years old. So he wrote his first filler script, and that was kind of his journey into writing and being published. So it was very exciting. And then he decided that comics were really not super a great way to make a living, and he wanted to have a future. And he's like, ugh, why am I wasting my life doing this? Looking back, like, wow. And so he enlisted in the army in World War II.
Be all you could be.
And he was all excited to go be a badass overseas and have a gun and all that. And then they found, they finished boot camp, they found out he was a writer, and they sent him right back to New York. He's like, all right.
Serious?
Yeah.
To do what?
So to do writing.
For what? Like APs or something?
Yeah, for training and education.
Oh, that's funny.
So he wrote instruction manuals and created films to teach the soldiers their jobs.
TRADOC?
MOS was his. I don't know what his MOS was. Oh. Yeah. I'm not an army person. I'm a Navy person. I don't know. I don't know the weird army terms. So he would study. He'd read all these like technical training manuals and then turn them into comics to teach the army people how to do their jobs, right?
But your strengths.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, plus soldiers are like, just out of high school.
Oh, this is great. Yeah. So a different way to like meet people's needs. Yeah. And so for me, like that, when I read that, I'm of course geeking out because I teach a lot of leadership development and that kind of thing. And I always wanted to teach leadership through comic books. So the fact he actually did that, of course, big fangirl, just, I squeed throughout this entire book. And it was just joyful, so much joy. So interestingly enough, there were only 8 people in his unit, in his whole command, only 8 training and development writers.
I'm sure comic book writers are not.
Well, that was his.
In the army.
Well, that was his style of being able to communicate the training. I mean, he kind of had free reign to do it. Yeah. But the 8 people who were in the army were actually kind of famous. Not all of them, but most of them. So Charles Addams, who created the Addams Family.
Really?
Yep. And Ivan Goff and Ben Roberts, who did Horatio Hornblower and Charlie's Angels.
Wow.
And Frank Capra, who wrote It's a Wonderful Life and Mr. Smith That Goes to Washington.
Wow.
So pretty amazing that he was
weird.
Yeah, they were all in the army at the same time, all like doing training and development.
Was this during World War II?
Yeah, it was World War II. So much joy to my heart.
Wow.
Amazing. Isn't that cool?
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah, and so, out of 8 of them, many of them there's only 2, there were others, but there were only 2 who didn't end up being, like, famous.
Yeah, can you imagine all those geniuses together, like, bouncing ideas of genius, honing a genius? All those geniuses?
Oh, that's so cool.
In a sea of army grunts.
Yeah, right? Just amazing. So he ended up getting out of the military, and while he was in, he actually, like you, he like really dives into his work, and that's his focus. Like he doesn't come up for air because he loves it so much, and he was working too hard too fast, and so they said, hey, you need to slow down because we don't have enough work for you and you're making us look bad. You've heard that before. And yeah, so he's like, okay. So he ended up getting his work done really fast, had some extra time on his hands, so he was doing back to Timely Comics, he was doing freelance work for them.
Oh, cool.
So when he got out, he went back full-time at Timely Comics and began his career. But he was also, interestingly enough, an adventurer. Well, I will say an adventurous romantic. So he loved writing. So when he was working at Timely Comics, he'd walk through Central Park all the time and get the nature and the people and everything. And he loved riding horses, which at the time you could rent horses in Central Park. So he'd ride on the horse. And,
but did he rent them or?
Yeah, you'd rent them and you'd go for a ride, and there's stables and everything. So he would do that. And there was one day he was riding through, and you're only allowed to walk or trot. So he saw a cop, and he's like, hey, and decided to gallop just to see what would happen. And the cop said, hey, son, you need to slow down. And so he's like, oh, okay. And then made the horse go faster. And then, tried to look all panicked and everything. And so he's doing a high-speed horse chase through Central Park. Pretending that he doesn't know how to ride a horse. And then ends up back at the stables. Just till I see this. It's not something I would do ever. So he ends up back at the stables and hops off the horse, and the cop said, "Oh, thank you so much, Mr. Policeman, for following me. I would have been so worried had you not been there to like protect me and stuff." And the cop said, "Oh yeah, you did a really good job of hanging on, son." And he just got a big kick out of that. So. And also, and interestingly enough, he loved to row. Not like we row, but he'd love to go out and take rowboats out in the Central Park when he would woo women. So he thought that was the most romantic.
Why else do you row?
That's how you would me, or I would you. Yeah, so he would go out on dates and take women out and row, and I thought that was really sweet, especially since
chicks dig rowing.
It's true. And what I loved, he said, "I felt like such a hunk," which is just adorable. So yeah, that was you never know where life is going to take you and how it kind of all intertwines.
Yeah. Cool.
Let's see. Oh, there's more. Yes. He went and he always went after what he wanted. So his wife was the love of his life, and he had a blind date with a woman. And
after he was married?
Didn't. Funny. So he had a blind date with a woman and went to her apartment, and her roommate opened the door, and it was love at first sight for him. So she opened the door, and he's like, "This is not Betty, this is Joni," and he like just fell in love with her right on the spot. And so they dated for a while, and she was married, and so she had to they were separated.
Whoa, okay.
She had to get divorced, and she was British, and loving Shakespeare and everything else, her accent just totally.
Oh, so wait, did he love Shakespeare before he met her or after?
Before. He grew up reading Shakespeare. Yeah. And so when she was British and beautiful, he was like, "Oh, yeah, this is the woman for me." So she went to Reno to get a divorce in 6 weeks. And she was there 5 weeks by herself, and then they were writing letters back and forth, and she wrote a letter to him, and it started, "Dear Jack," and then it went into the thing, and he's like, "Whoa!" So he immediately flew out there, and he's like, "I'm the soft-footed little New Yorker surrounded by all these Marlboro men."
Wait a minute. What, Jack?
Right, so she was like,
He didn't understand why she said Jack?
Well, she would obviously written
somebody else. Oh, so he went out there to get the story straight.
Yeah, okay, to get her back. He's like, "Oh, I clearly need to go," because he thought, she's out there getting a divorce, whatever, and she's clearly
ran into somebody else. Okay.
Yeah. So he went there to go reconnect with her, and they ended up getting married.
Well, what was the story?
Huh?
Did she do that on purpose?
It didn't go into that.
Oh,
it did not go into that. So he went there to go woo her back, he said, and then
interesting. And
he stayed there until she was officially divorced. Did not let her out of his sight. So they went to get her divorce papers at the court, and then the next room, and then he said, "Hey, well, can you just marry us on the spot?" And
he wasn't gonna let her go.
Nope. And the judge said,
poor Jack.
Right, and the judge, who was so used to doing divorces, was thrilled to actually marry somebody, so he married them on the spot. That was pretty cool. So got divorced, married, and then they were married for the rest of their lives in a beautiful marriage.
Wow, cool.
Yeah, pretty amazing story, I thought. So he was 25 when they married. She died in 2017, and he died 1 year after in 2018. Wow. So he was pretty devastated last year from what I was, reading and stuff. But just amazing. I love that. I love that love story.
He was 96.
He was 95.
Okay.
Yeah, I have to do math in my head.
Just curious.
Wait, I did write that down.
It was around there, 95, 96.
Yeah. All right. So, also, one thing I think is interesting, when you never know where life is going to take you, which comic book did Stanley write for?
Which comic book?
Which did he write for? Which did he create and write for?
Marvel.
Yeah, he also wrote for DC.
Oh, he did. He's double.
Drop the mic, walk out. I had no idea. Yeah. It was only. What do you have? Yeah, I was reading this going, what?
I didn't even know the difference before I met her. Like, I don't know, comic books.
So DC wanted to try something, and so in 2001. They had a special project where they asked Stan Lee to recreate Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, The Flash, and JLA. So it was really Justice League, sorry. And so he reimagined those characters and wrote comic book as a limited series. The DC fans were like, whoa, it's way too much like Marvel, obviously. And so it didn't go very well, but it was super cool, and I have to find them because I'm fascinated. But I love that he's like, all right, I don't know how it's going to work, but I'll give it a shot and write for the competitor comic.
Let me get this straight. So he created those characters first for Marvel, and then he had to do them again for DC?
No. So Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and Flash are all DC comic book characters. Created by DC Comics, all that.
Oh, okay.
So in 2001, they're like, let's do a special project, see what happens. So Stanley, if you were to create these comics, how would you do it, and can you write it for us?
Oh, okay. So the characters already existed, that they weren't comics.
The characters already existed, and they were comics. They were comics for many, many, many years.
Well, then what was Stan Lee doing? Just reinventing them?
Yeah, reinventing them from a different perspective.
Okay.
So Superman was an alien police officer.
So he didn't write those initial comics for DC? Those characters for comics? No. Okay.
No.
He just reinvented them for
just a limited episode.
Oh, gotcha.
Limited series. Okay. A limited series, yeah. From 2001 to 2002. So Batman was Wayne Williams, a black wrestler fighting crime. Wonder Woman was Maria Mendoza, who gained powers from a mystical amulet. Green Lantern was a woman who gained her powers from a mystical ring. And the Flash was Mary Maxwell, a terminally ill girl given super speed.
The Flash was a female?
Yep, and so was Green Lantern. And then the Justice League was was reimagining all these heroes like working together.
But those characters are initially Marvel?
No, they were always DC
Always
comics.
DC.
Always DC comics.
Okay.
Always DC Comics. It was just, that's why it was so funny, is that it was a limited thing.
Okay.
Like saying, hey, it'd be like if we asked my sister to do Dream 10X for us. Hey, can you do Dream 10X for us? Like, see what happens.
She'd fail. Nobody can recreate this epic wonder.
Reimagine it for us and do an episode. Yeah. So it's like taking.
Okay.
So. You're so cute. Yes, he's always Marvel. That was just a little limited series. But anyway, back to you never know where life is going to take you. Why not try something new? And if somebody offers you something you never thought you would do, like write for DC Comics, why not? All right, so recognizing strengths and empowering your team. So Marvel's brand was creativity, and creativity is so empowering. Creativity does not happen in a solitary box. He really recognized the strengths in others and the strengths of people around him and his own strengths, and empowered people to do their job. And the Marvel method was the unique way that they had this collaborative approach to creating comics. In traditional other comics, the writer would write the story, the artist would do the art, and then the editor would edit and it would go. The way Stan Lee did it was he would have like a storyline in his head and then figure out which artist was going to be the best to write that story and design it. So he'd be like, give the whole theme, this is kind of what I want to happen, and then Steve Ditko or Jack Kirby would go in and just create the story and the intricate experience, so they're really telling the story. And then the bubbles would come in after. So it was totally opposite approach, but very collaborative. And so Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko, they both have very different styles.
So I'm going to sneeze.
So Steve Ditko did Spider-Man, wrote Spider-Man, and Jack Kirby did the Hulk and Thor and X-Men. Man.
Wait, who did the storyline for Iron Man? Kirby?
Oh, Kirby was Iron Man,
Yeah.
and Ditko was Strange, Doctor Strange. So he looked at what the artist's capability was and how he wanted to tell the story. And so when he went to Kirby, was busy, and he liked Ditko. He thought Ditko's style would be better when he created Spider-Man. So it's like looking at the strengths and who's going to be best. What I like about this is John Kao. John Kao is a leadership neuroscientist, PhD, as well as medical doctor, and he's also a professional jazz pianist. He's, again, another just genius, amazing person, and super nice. And he talks about creativity in a way that's really structured, because we think of creative, it's all the things. But what he talks, the way he talks about creativity is like through jazz, where you have the structure,
Right. Well,
and you have to have, what?
Okay, sorry.
you have a structure, and then within that structure and framework, you can like expand however you want to. So in jazz, for example, you have a certain key or a certain melody, and then you can go wherever you want and just bring it back to this main concept. So it's that.
Love it.
Yeah. And so it's the same thing. This is how he created.
Love that. Yeah.
The framework. So the framework is, this is kind of the story we want to go. Now go create within this framework.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Like that.
You had a question.
No, well, I was just thinking jazz is structured because you don't think of it as structured.
Exactly.
Because it's so random. But to think that all that creative randomness is actually highly structured is really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. A little bit of chaos theory in there.
Yeah. And I was just trying to think of the analogy, the comparison with Stanley and jazz music, or any music where you have like, you know, people riffing off one another, playing together, a band, you know. Is it true that there's usually one person like directing?
Yeah.
You think so?
Yeah. And sometimes like in jazz music, it'll change from person to person.
Okay.
Yeah. And so like when the drummer takes over, everybody's following the drummer, and then they'll turn it over to the guitarist. So yeah, yes, and it's, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's like really a shared leadership experience.
And whoever's leading at any one time is depending on what their strengths are at a particular point in the artistry, the creative process.
So who needs to be highlighted?
Wow, that's so much fun when you're in a group like that, whether it's, you know, it's a small team of software engineers who can riff like that, or a band, or, you know, these creative types making comics. It's a really good feeling. It's really, really hard to come by, but this guy, doggone, he's in the army and he gets surrounded by a small group of geniuses, so some people it just happens.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is such a good feeling when you can just really be empowered to be creative and create something amazing.
And typically I'm just a genius on my own, you know, and it's just really lonely.
So going back to the Marvel Universe. So like in the Marvel Universe, Stanley really created that. He created the Marvel characters and then said, hey, you know what? What if, because he based everybody in New York City, what if we're all in the same city, they interacted? And what if they would come across each other? And so that's where the cross comic books characters, so all of a sudden you'd see the Hulk and the Hulk and Captain America fighting together, or She-Hulk and Daredevil. So yeah, so it's like, oh well, of course, if they're fighting, if they're saving the same city, why wouldn't they cross? So he created this whole universe. But one quote that I really like that John Cahill says is, innovation should be a systematic process, not just random inspiration. So creating these structures and frameworks and really empowering people in their strengths to do what they're best at can create this collaborative environment to build greatness. So how do we help organizations create more space for creativity? Whew, that's a whole nother podcast.
It's over my pay grade.
All right. So next up, what I love about Stanley too is that he was so engaged with his fans. He's so personable, and when you see him on TV or whatever and just talking, like he just would come up and talk like true extrovert, so relaxed. I mean, there are stories of him talking to Bill Clinton and saying, "Oh, Bill, you want your picture with me?" And yeah, just very relaxed, and I wish I could be more like that. And
me too.
Yeah, so funny. But he really engaged with his fans, and he was very transparent. He made people feel like they were part of a community. And it's like, for me, ACR has been really trying to build that community and reach out and do everything else.
Alexandria Community Rowing.
Yep, sorry.
The team you're a part of.
The team I'm a part of. Yep, the rowing team. Yep, I get excited and I just go. I love that he kind of structured that. So he created for the fans the Marvel Fan Club, and it's the 1960s Merry Marvel Marching Society, and there was a whole gimmick where you had to figure out what MMMS meant, and then that really engaged people. When you figured it out, then you would get like entry into the club. And then he would have like special things for the club. They'd have special newsletters, and people really felt like they were part of something. They had a pin they could wear to work, and when he went to visit colleges, people would wear their pins and say, "I'm the MMS Marching Society." So that was fun. He also had a soapbox where he would encourage people to write in that he could respond to. And he was, again, very transparent. And one story I love is that they were putting out comics constantly, and not all of them were the best comics. And one reader wrote in, yeah, this is really terrible. This really did not enjoy this one at all. And so he's like, yep, you're absolutely right. And in his Stan's soapbox, you're absolutely right. It was a terrible one, but we have given you so many good ones. You can give us some grace for this one terrible one. So I love that he just owned it, was transparent. He also wasn't afraid to address real world and social issues that people were facing every day. And like civil rights, drug abuse, political corruption, helping establish comics as a medium for real storytelling and really helping engage people and from aesthetic experience. So, in past Dream 10X podcasts, we've talked about John Dewey. Aesthetic experience helps to re-engage your brain differently. Well, comics is one of those aesthetic things because it engages your brain differently through art, because comics are really an art and storytelling. And so having it gives people a sense of, oh, it's not just me going through this crazy thing. So he really normalized what comics could do and what comics were and made them a valued resource, which I thought was really neat. We'll talk about that more in a minute. As far as social issues, the dog just sat down. I was waiting for her. We went to. We're getting side eye right now. We haven't fed them dinner yet. So he went to college campus tours in the 1960s. He realized he needed to get out there more and talk about comics and how it is a really powerful medium. So he'd go to different universities, and it was funny. He went to one university in California, I forget which one it was, and he's like, all right, I'm gonna be, I think it was Stanford. And so he dressed up in his suit and went in and was talking to these, and it was the 60s, so everybody was in like jeans and whatever, and he was way too relaxed, and felt like, oh yeah, so I'm a big nerd. And then he went to Princeton, and he's like, okay, I'm going to be cool with the kids, and I'm going to dress down and wear my hippie clothes. And they were all in suits and ties. So he was like, whatever, I can't get it right.
East Coast.
So he really legitimized comics as a worthy medium for literature. And so this college campus is in like, again, normalizing what comics are, which is super helpful for me and my generation.
So why was he going to college campuses again?
To talk about comics and legitimize them as a valuable source.
For textbooks? A valuable source for what?
A valuable source for information and news and storytelling.
And how much headway? Because you still buy a textbook, they're incredibly boring.
Yeah.
So I guess.
So it wasn't for textbook. It was more like normalizing it as part of like, it's okay to read these things. You're not abnormal to read these things. Okay. It's okay.
You're not abnormal.
No, seriously, you're not like.
You can be educated and read a comic book.
Yeah.
Right?
PhD reads comics. Yeah. Yeah. Versus, it's that little nerdy kid in the club. So this is an okay source. We're going to talk about powerful topics. And so I'll jump into this. I was going to go backwards, but I think it flows better now. The comic books, one of the things he did was, number 4, use your own experiences to create meaningful work. One of the issues when we talk about social issues and normalizing comics, there was the Comics Code Authority, and they were the body which reviewed every comic that went out from any distributor to make sure it didn't have drugs or sex or violence or punching or literally it was.
Was this a government agency?
It was, I'm not sure if it was government or government funded.
Never heard of that.
Yeah, but it was created by this one dude who said, oh no, we can't have comics, it's really bad. And so all of these had to go through that. And I don't remember if it was government or not. But it was the way it was supposed to go with publishing. So every comic went through this.
We can't have children reading
really bad.
This. They rot their minds.
And then the U.S. Health Department reached out to Stan and said, hey, we really want to focus on an anti-drug story because drugs are getting really prevalent, and can you help us do that? And so he did. He wrote Spider-Man, and one of his friends was taking these pills, and the Green Goblin was like a drug dealer, and the bad influence of what happens when you are on drugs. And he did it. It was more of like a health issue versus a criminal issue. So it's like, this is actually a health issue and we need to talk about how we can help people, versus really more of like a health issue and helping people take care of themselves. And if you see somebody who has like a drug issue who's your friend, like how do you help them versus get them thrown in jail. So he really is, it's an addiction, talked about it as an addiction, not a criminal behavior. So the CCA, of course, had a meltdown and said, no, you can't put this comic out. And he's like, but the Department of Education says you want to put it out. And they said, no. And yes, he's like, well, screw you guys, I'm doing it anyway. So he did without the CCA approval, which was hugely divergent and can cause some serious issues. But the impact was people loved it. And the CCA were able to modify their rules and say, okay, well, this had huge impact. It really brought, that was the first one that really brought some serious social issues to mainstream comics and opened the door for other comics to really embrace some of these other social issues. I know there's race issues, there's equity issues, there's drug issues, all kinds of stuff. So it was really, really cool that he led the way in that.
Interesting.
And Spider-Man was, and with that as well, he created real heroes. When I say real heroes, they're real, like normal people like you and I with real everyday problems. And that's, I think, what made Marvel so readable. Versus, I love Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman's DC Comics, but it was very much a superhero focus, and she, the real world problems weren't as prevalent. Versus Spider-Man, who had zits, and he had to he did, and then he had to manage between work and being. I have homework to do. I can't go out and be a superhero. How do I have homework to do? I have assignments to do. I really like this girl MJ, but I don't know if she likes me back. It's like real tangible issues that everybody, like teenagers, deal with. His actual.
He could just shoot her with his webs and like.
Come here, baby. So he created like normal, tangible people that people could relate to, and I love that. So his very first comic, when he had free reign to do so, was the Fantastic Four. And the Fantastic Four had 4 key people. Reed Richards was Mr. Fantastic, and he was like plastic and rubbery, and he could like bend all kinds of ways. He was married to Sue Storm, who could turn invisible. Johnny Storm was her brother, the Human Torch, and then the Thing, who was always my favorite, was like a giant rock guy who could like crush things, and he would always say, "It's clobbering time!" So
that sounds like you.
Yeah, I love the Thing.
She says that to me all the time.
You like it. So they didn't have secret identities like other superheroes. They were themselves. And they had, again, real world problems. So they had marital issues. Reed Richards and Sue had marital issues that they had to work through, and they fought. Johnny and Sue were brother-sister, and so they fought and like had to work through stuff. So it was like all this family relationship stuff. So I love that they brought that in. And Ben Richards being like, he was, a normal average guy, had a family, they went through this nuclear accident. Now he's like a rock beast, alienated by his family, like dealing with that emotional trauma and issues. So I love that. And other characters were X-Men, Incredible Hulk, Black Panther, Inhumans, and he did those with Jack Kirby. Spider-Man, Doctor Strange with Steve Ditko, Thor, Iron Man, Daredevil, and Ant-Man.
Dang.
Yeah.
Wait, what about She-Hulk?
Well, we're getting there.
Oh.
What?
It sounded like that was the set.
No, that was just a lot of them. There were more, but that's like kind of the main ones that we know today. Yep. So with all of that, we talked about that. Oh, and Daredevil, that was another social issue too. So Daredevil, do you know who Daredevil is? We watched that show for a while.
Yeah, okay.
Do you remember it at all?
Yes.
Do you remember the guy?
I don't remember his name, but he was blind, right?
Yeah. He was blind.
Yeah.
Matt Murdock was a blind lawyer. And so another social issue, he's like, he recognized people's strengths in the comic, where being disabled was actually a strength because he could use his other senses. So he was the first blind superhero, disabled superhero.
Cool. That's cool.
Yeah. So again, comics, social issues, and talking to people in a different way. Mm-hmm. So, use your experiences to create meaning in your work. All the experience of social issues in life, he created right into his comic book characters.
Cool. That's awesome.
So the last is the influence on a generation, or mostly influence on me, but really a generation, because we were so excited, like when the first Iron Man came out and all those movies, like really, we are seen. I felt so seen. So way back in the day, when I didn't really read comics, I started reading comics a little bit later, because I did read Shakespeare growing up when I was a young kid. too in the library. But the Amazing Spider-Man series came on the air. Did you ever watch the Amazing Spider-Man cartoon?
No.
No? Okay. And Stanley was the producer for that, as well as the voice, which is really cool. And then the Marvel superheroes. Did you ever watch the Marvel superheroes?
No.
Too sure. Did you watch The Incredible Hulk with Lou Ferrigno?
Yeah.
All right, we got one. That's actually what I first saw. So before I got into the cartoons, The Incredible Hulk, and I loved the Hulk. I loved Lou Ferrigno, although I didn't know he was Lou Ferrigno at the time. But I loved like how angry he was, but really able to like make a difference. Bruce Banner was kind of like, meh, but Lou as the Hulk was just remarkable, and I totally fell in love with the character.
The muscles.
I do. It's true. It's true. I love you. So I just fell in love with the character and his being able to be himself. And Bruce Banner was struggling with that duality within himself, but Hulk was like, "This is who I am. I'm embracing my amygdala. I'm living my amygdala. I'm here." So I always thought, for some reason, I was always drawn to that character. Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends was amazing. It was amazing, obviously. And then the Incredible Hulk animated series. But what really transformed my life was the She-Hulk, Savage She-Hulk.
Wow.
So in response to the Incredible Hulk and how positively that went over, they created a female version, the She-Hulk. And I loved the She-Hulk because Savage
loves She-Hulk.
I have a tattoo and everything. Used to have green hair. So I love She-Hulk for a lot of reasons. One is positive body image. So it took her a hot minute to struggle with being the Hulk because she was, she's a lawyer and she's feminine, what have you. And then she ended up getting a transfusion with Bruce Banner's blood. That was her cousin. They were cousins. And then she got transformed into the Hulk. And so she struggled with being this huge, monstrous, muscular thing, but ended up really embracing it and making strength as a form of beauty. And so, obviously, I work out a lot, and I see...
Obviously.
And so I see a lot of benefits to strength versus skinny. And the skinny is such a genre, and most women can't achieve that. And so, like, when we were growing up, skinny was the thing. Like really skinny. And so being able to embrace strength as the skinny and having muscles and form, like the American gladiators, they had muscles and form, and strength was a form of beauty. And she was good with that. So that was really helpful for me, being a bigger girl and an athlete, because I did martial arts and everything. I was a bigger girl. I wasn't big, I was just really freaking strong and had big old legs, which I still do. So that really helped me embrace that side of myself, saying I don't have to be like these other girls. I can be this big muscular beast. And still, what I love about her is that she maintained her smarts when she was the Hulk. So she was also hilarious. Comic book, like, she was just hilarious. She broke the fourth wall. This was later in the comics, but she broke the fourth wall. So do you know the walls? Okay.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
So third wall is your environment, where like you're in a horror movie and says, maybe we shouldn't run up the stairs. We could be in a horror movie, kind of thing. They recognize the environment that they're in. Or you're playing Dungeons and Dragons and all of a sudden the DM says, and you roll a 20 and you recognize, all of a sudden you see yourself surrounded by these tiny little plastic figurines. So breaking the third wall is recognizing the environment you're in.
What is that? Relative to, what is that? Like,
what do you mean?
What are these walls? What are you talking about? I have no idea.
So in a story, so like for example, in The Matrix, he recognizes that he is in...
I understand that, but
Okay.
What are you referencing? Is it
in the Shield
an
comics.
academic thing, or...
No, it's writing. It's writing.
It's a writing idiom?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Writing and acting.
Okay.
Yeah, and acting. And so in acting, like breaking the fourth wall is communicating with the audience. So, you see a lot of like pantomime players in the UK, they are interacting with the audience. Like they recognize their third wall and then they break the fourth wall.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So acting is a big part of it. Yeah.
Okay.
And so in opera, we always talked about the third line. So what is the story in this? So you get into character by understanding the background of the person and really embracing that, and by understanding the background you can embrace the character and show the character. So yeah, recognizing the environment you're in, and the fourth wall is the audience. So she talks to the audience all the time, like, this is the dumbest thing ever, or it's really funny. So I love that she maintains her comedic environment. She recognizes what's happening out of hours. She's very self-aware and aware of what's situational awareness, and so just as a character she's just awesome. And she's, of course, what gets Matt. So she really helped me embrace all that I am, and somebody that I've tried to emulate in a lot of different ways, as I'm sure you know if you know me at all. So that's it. I really loved this book, obviously. Excelsior, The Amazing Life of Stanley, again written in his own words about himself and his life. Beautiful story, so I strongly recommend.
Awesome.
Yay.
I love how She-Hulk is like your alter ego.
It is.
And it has been ever since I've known her. So I kind of equate her with She-Hulk in a lot of ways. And every Halloween, guess who she's just full body green paint, She-Hulk. So anyway, thanks for listening to this episode, and we will see you next book.